Welcome and thank you for joining me for this quiet journey into the past. In this story, we will take a long, gentle walk through medieval Europe. There will be no rush. We will move slowly, pausing often, noticing details, and lingering on the small things that made up ordinary life. At the edge of a rising hill where stone walls meet the sky, there is always a threshold, the place where road becomes fortress. In the Middle Ages, this place was called the Gatehouse, and it was far more than a door. It was a watchtower, a customs post, a first line of defense, and a stage where the power of the Lord behind the walls was quietly displayed. Long before a traveler reaches it, the gatehouse makes its presence felt. The road narrows and climbs. Ditches or a moat glimmer below. Perhaps a wooden drawbridge spans dark water. High above, twin towers flank an arched portal, their battlements cut with arrow slits. The portcullis, a heavy grid of timber shod in iron, waits half raised like teeth. To approach is to feel watched. Somewhere behind those narrow openings, guards measure every movement. Approach begins with sound. Hooves ring on bridge planks, carts creak and groan, chains clink where the drawbridge hangs. From within come muted voices, the shift of armored men, the bark of a dog. Flags stir, smoke curls from guardroom hearth. Even the most ordinary day carries a sense of small ceremony. You are entering someone's stronghold. Travelers pause before the outer barbican, if one exists, a low-walled forecourt meant to trap enemies but serving also as waiting space. Merchants halt wagons, peasants lead pigs and chickens close, clutching permits or hoping to bargain. Pilgrims tighten grips on staves. Messengers adjust packs. Here tolls may be demanded. Coin for goods, a measure of grain, or simply proof of loyalty to the Lord. Guards appear. Some wear quilted gambesons and steel caps. Others chainmail with surcoats in house colors. Spears or crossbows gleam. A captain may question newcomers, name, purpose, whom they serve. Merchants show charters from guilds. Messengers produce sealed letters. Pilgrims sometimes rely on badges and prayers. Suspicion rises if answers falter, a shout to bring more men from within. Yet most days end with nod and wave through. Trade feeds castle as much as it protects it. The gatehouse itself is more complex than it first seems. Above the main arch, floors of stone or heavy timber hold guard rooms. Arrow loops allow defenders to rain bolts or arrows down if trouble stirs. Murder holes pierce the roof of passage, ready for stones, boiling water, or hot sand in siege. Thick double doors close behind the iron portcullis, turning the passage into a trap. Yet when peace reigns, these fearsome features fade into background of daily life. Inside, a fire crackles where off-duty guards warm themselves. Benches line walls, racks hold spears and halberds. A small table bears ledgers, lists of tolls and visitors. The smell is of smoke, leather, and metal polish. mixed with faint damp of stone. Dogs doze until strangers stir them to barking. Sometimes a small shrine sits in corner St. George or Michael, guarding soldiers who watch the gate. Life here follows rhythm of traffic. At dawn, the portcullis is winched up with groan and clatter. Drawbridge chains rattle. Farmers from outlying manors bring grain or eggs to sell. Servants return from fields with carts of firewood. Traders from distant towns arrive with cloth, salt, or wine, hopeful for sale inside walls. Messengers gallop through, splashed with mud. Children press close to see strangers. Dogs weave underfoot until shooed away. Ceremony accompanies important arrivals. When a noble guest approaches, trumpets may sound, guards snap to attention, captain rides forward, and the drawbridge lowers with deliberate grace. Banners wave, grooms hurry to stables, servants to kitchen. The gatehouse becomes theatre, displaying the Lord's wealth and order. The visitor passes under carved coats of arms and into courtyard lined with curious faces. Yet ordinary days define the gatehouse more than pageantry. Guards stamp cold feet in winter, chat softly in summer heat, sharpen weapons, dice to pastime. Apprentices sweep and oil chains. A blacksmith may appear to fix hinge or ring. Dogs patrol yard, noses to ground. Travelers bring gossip. A new tax upriver. War rumors, strange weather. The gatehouse listens and quietly feeds news inward. Defense drills punctuate routine. Horn blasts, portcullis slams down, archers take posts. It may be only practice, but adrenaline spikes. Young guards learn to drop chains smoothly, to aim from arrow loops, to pour stones from parapet. In real danger, bandit, raiders revolt. This calm threshold becomes deadly funnel where few can pass alive. Season changes color the place. In spring, mud splashes wagons and guards grumble about wet boots. Summer sees dust and heat shimmering off stone, buzzing flies, open gates for ventilation. Autumn smells of apples and smoke as harvest carts rumble in. Winter ices the drawbridge chains and stiffens hands. Travelers arrive cloaked and pale, grateful for warmth beyond. Festivals brighten it. Wreaths hung at Christmas, flowers in May, banners on saints' days. Tolls and markets grow around the gate. Where traffic pauses, vendors thrive. Pies, cheap ale, shoe repair, charms for safe travel. Children sell rushlights, beggars plead to those waiting entry. A small economy hums, watched by guards who sometimes join in buying treats. The gatehouse also serves justice. Petty thieves caught outside may be tried in its shadow. Toll cheats punished, proclamations nailed to its door. Sometimes a condemned man hangs near, grim warning to rogues. Other times heralds read royal news to gathered crowd. Thus the place becomes symbol of order as well as passage. Night brings transformation. At sunset, horns sound, the portcullis lowers with heavy finality, chains clanking. Doors close, locks turn. Latecomers may plead for entry and be refused unless they pay or know someone inside. Torches flare on walls, guards pace in measured beat. Beyond, road fades into dark woods where danger waits. Inside, the courtyard sleeps easier knowing the gate is shut. For those on duty, night is long. They walk parapets, peer through slits, listen for hoofbeats or stealthy splash at moat. Fires are banked, hands warmed, dice cast quietly to fight boredom. An owl hoots, river murmurs under bridge. Somewhere a wolf howls and is answered by dogs. The watch endures till dawn horn sounds and gates creak open again. The gatehouse stands as both welcome and warning. It says, "You may enter if you come in peace and pay your due, but cross this lord at peril." It shelters merchants and pilgrims, yet crush invaders. It is a blend of engineering, ritual, and daily work, the living edge of castle life. Every fortress lives or dies by the watch kept upon its walls, behind towers and battlements, beyond portcullis and moat. It is the castle guard who holds the first and last measure of safety. Their work is often invisible to guests feasting in the great hall or to merchants busy in the yard. Yet without their patient vigilance, no lord could sleep secure. The guard is a varied company. Some are seasoned men-at-arms, scarred veterans of campaigns who now prefer steady pay to wandering war. Others are younger sons of farmers or tradesmen, drawn by the promise of coin, a bed, and daily bread. A few are retainers of noble birth, learning soldier's craft before seeking knighthood. They wear whatever armor the Lord provides, mail shirts patched and repatched, padded gambesons, sometimes steel caps or battered helms. Spears, bills, and crossbows line the armory racks. Swords hang at the hips of trusted men. Their life begins at dawn muster. As light touches battlements, a horn sounds or the captain calls, roll in the courtyard. Men gather, stamping cold feet, saluting with spears, or bowing to the Lord if he appears. The day's orders are read. Patrol schedule, gate watch, errands beyond walls. Punishments for last night's sloth, a guard who slept at post, a man drunk on duty, are brief and public, a few harsh words, or if serious, lashes. Discipline keeps everyone alive. Then they disperse to posts. Some climb stone stairs to walk the wall walk, that narrow path behind battlements. Here they pace in pairs, eyes scanning fields and forest, ears tuned to far-off hoofbeats or the creak of cart. From towers they watch roads, rivers, and approaches. Others man the gatehouse, working the drawbridge and portcullis, checking travelers, collecting tolls. A few serve as runners, carrying messages between hall and guard rooms, or escorting visitors to steward. Routine fills most days. On walls the rhythm is slow but never idle. Step, pause, scan horizon, shift crossbow bolt, Nod to partner, murmur news. They note changes, a tree felled that might hide raiders, smoke where none should be, a lone rider testing ground. Below, in yard or barbican, guards drill when off rotation. Spear thrusts, sword cuts, shield walls. Archers practice on straw butts, shafts thudding in steady beat. Between watches they eat simple fare, dark bread, cheese, broth, and small ale. Meals are taken in guardroom where fire burns and weapons hang drying. Dice and carved pieces appear. Stories of past wars flow, half brag, half warning. Young recruits learn from veterans how to spot ambush or judge traveler by gait. Camaraderie builds strong. These men must trust one another when danger comes. Danger is rare but never far. Bandits may test defenses, slipping close to steal livestock or kidnap for ransom. Disputes between lords can flare suddenly. One day's peace becomes next day's siege. In border castles, raiding parties strike and vanish. Guards learn to sleep lightly and keep gear near. When alarm horn blows, they rush to stations, archers to loops, spearmen to gate, garrison to yard to form defense. Siege is the ultimate trial. Then the guard becomes army manning walls day and night, pouring boiling water or oil, launching stones from mangonels, repairing breaches under fire. Exhaustion grinds, fear gnaws, but discipline holds. In Chronicles, lords claim glory, but it is these common soldiers who keep arrows flying and portcullis shut. Not all threats are warlike. Fire is deadly to timber hoardings. Every guard must know alarm cry and bucket chain. Plague can sweep garrison, forcing desperate measures to isolate sick. Weather too, winter ice makes battlements treacherous. Summer heat drains strength. Still, watch must go on. Season paints scarred life vividly. In spring, rain slicks stones, gear rusts fast, and scouts watch for swollen rivers or raiders stealing planting time. Summer brings heat and dust. Men shade eyes, drink warm ale, and swar flies but keep scanning horizon. Autumn smells of smoke and apples. Farmers pay rents at gate, and guards count wagons. Winter is hardest. Icy steps, numb fingers on bowstring, long dark hours when sleep tempts. Yet the fire in guardroom and shared jokes keep morale alive. Hierarchy governs the watch. A captain commands often trusted knight or veteran sergeant. Under him lieutenants assign posts, oversee drills, and report to steward or directly to lord. Loyalty is prized. Betrayal means ruin. Some captains hold keys to armory and treasure rooms. Others ride with lord in war but return to run garrison in peace. Ceremony touches the guard too. When lord rides out, they line courtyard with spears raised. At festivals they march with banners, mail polished and helms bright. On saints' days they attend blessing of weapons. Priests sprinkle holy water on blades and bows. Before campaign or dangerous hunt, they kneel for prayer. Despite rough speech and dice games, most keep tokens of faith, a cross, saint's medal, or charm sewn under padding. The guard also acts as police within walls. They keep peace in yard, break tavern brawls, escort prisoners to cell or pillory. Merchants cheating scales may find a mailed hand on shoulder. Drunken servants are hauled before steward. Thus they shape daily order, not just war readiness. Evenings change pace. As sun lowers, men rotate. Fresh watch takes walls. Tired ones head to guardroom or humble quarters. Shared bunks, straw mattresses, perhaps small hearth. They eat, men gear, swap tales. Laughter rings, cards or dice clatter, a lute might strum. Yet at sunset horn sounds again, gates close, portcullis lowers, and night watch takes solemn hold. Night watch is hardest. Stars wheel overhead, fields vanish in dark. Every rustle could be thief or beast. Torches smoke, lanterns sputter. Guards walk slowly to stay awake, stamping feet, whispering to partner. Silence sharpens hearing. Distant owl cry or splash in moat jolts nerves, yet they endure, knowing safety of whole castle rests on their eyes. Rewards are modest, steady wage, meals, sometimes right to small plot or share of spoils. Prestige is mixed. Villages may resent tolls or arrests, yet also respect skill and courage. A good guard may rise to sergeant, even captain, rare but possible path to knighthood if Lord favors. More often it is quiet life of service, unnoticed but essential. Friendship defines them. Men who faced winter storms or first arrows together form bonds deep as kinship. They share bread, guard secrets, mourn fallen comrades with rough toasts. This brotherhood keeps watch through boredom and terror alike. So imagine the castle not as silent stone but alive with these centuries. Boots on wall walk, low talk in guardroom, sudden trumpet when danger nears. Picture the common soldier leaning on spear, scanning dusk, a tiny piece in great feudal puzzle yet vital. The castle guard is unseen spine of medieval power, tireless, humble, alert, beneath banners and battlements. The day of court dawned cold and pale over the castle. Mist clung to the moat and drifted across the cobbled yard, blurring the shapes of men and beasts already at work. Beyond the high outer gate, villagers gathered in the chill, waiting for permission to enter and present their petitions. Within the walls the great tower loomed, its narrow windows dark against the dawn, and from its crown a single banner stirred in the early breeze. Inside the great hall was already stirring to life, though the Lord had not yet appeared. Servants moved in measured silence, sweeping yesterday's rushes and scattering new ones laced with mint and dried marigold. The long trestle tables that had stood for supper were carried aside. Today the hall must be clear for the business of rule. At the far end, the dais was prepared with solemn care. A high-backed chair carved with lions' heads was drawn forward and draped with a heavy cloth of red and gold. At its side, a smaller seat awaited the lady of the castle, and a narrow lectern was set for the steward who would read the rolls of law. The fire on the hearth was coaxed into brightness, its light catching the polished iron of candlestands and the brass studs of the Lord's chair. Pages hurried with cushions and stools for visiting knights and clerks. The steward himself arrived before sunrise, thin and brisk, his bundle of scrolls hugged to his chest, his keys clinking as he strode to the dais. He oversaw everything, muttering now and then to the beadle, who would keep order among the crowd. As the first bells of the day rang from the chapel tower, the hall began to fill. Men-at-arms took their places along the walls, halberds upright, eyes keen. A scribe spread his inks and sharpened quills at a low table to one side. The chaplain entered, grave in dark robe and white collar, and took his place near the Lord's chair to advise on oaths and matters of conscience. Courtiers and household knights followed, each nodding to the steward before taking position. The hum of voices grew, but never too loud. This was a solemn day. Then the great oak doors swung wide. The Lord entered slowly, his cloak trimmed with fur against the morning chill, his sword at his hip but peaceably sheathed. Behind him came the lady, serene and watchful, a long veil trailing from her headdress. Pages hurried ahead to light fresh candles on the dais. The crowd bent low as the pair mounted the steps and took their seats. The chaplain murmured a blessing. The steward lifted his staff and called the hall to order. The first petitioner stepped forward, a farmer, hat in hand, face worn by sun and weather. He bowed deeply before speaking, his words simple and halting as he told of a neighbor's ox straying into his barley and ruining the young crop. The steward read from a scroll the custom of the region. The Lord leaned forward, asking quiet questions, while the lady whispered a suggestion at his side. At last the judgment was given. The neighbor must pay in grain at harvest. The farmer bowed again and backed away, relief on his face. Next came a merchant, robes fine but voice edged with worry. Bandits on the forest road, he said, had stolen a wagon of cloth. The Lord's brow furrowed. He questioned the merchant carefully, learning the place and hour of attack. Then he turned to his captain of the guard, who stepped forward, saluted, and promised a mounted patrol before week's end. The scribe wrote swiftly, quill scratching. The merchant bowed and withdrew, a little straighter now. One by one they came, millers disputing rights to the stream, widows asking for relief from tax, craftsmen protesting unfair tolls at the gate. Some matters were small and swiftly judged, others roused long debate. The chaplain reminded the hall of the law of sanctuary and the charity due to the poor. The steward cross-checked the castle's rolls to ensure no ruling would breach long-held custom. The lady listened keenly, speaking softly to the Lord when mercy might soften a stern decree. Sometimes the mood grew tense. A poacher was brought in under guard, his hands bound, a gaunt rabbit dangling from his belt as proof. The man knelt, pale with fear, as the Lord questioned him. The chaplain spoke of trespass and repentance, the captain of the guard of duty to the forest law. At last the Lord spared the man's life, but fined him harshly and ordered him to serve a month at the kennels. The hall let out a breath as the poacher was led away, alive but chastened. By mid-morning the doors opened again to admit envoys from a nearby manor. They carried letters sealed with wax, requesting arbitration in a boundary dispute. The steward read the letters aloud in a clear voice, while the lord and lady conferred. A map was brought forth, its edges curled and worn, showing streams and copses, meadows and mill. Knights craned to see. After long debate, the Lord deferred judgment until witnesses could be called. He would send riders to walk the land. Such matters, he knew, could not be rushed. All the while the hall hummed with quiet life. Dogs nosed through the rushes for crumbs. Pages ran messages to the kitchens for bread and ale to refresh the company. Now and then a servant stoked the fire, sending sparks whirling into the smoky light. Outside the windows the mist lifted, showing a bright, cold sky. Bells rang again from the chapel, marking the passage of the morning. At last the steward tapped his staff and called the final cases. A pair of young men came to swear fealty, kneeling before the Lord with hands clasped. The chaplain blessed their oaths. The lady smiled gently as each rose, new vassals bound by promise. Then came a traveling minstrel to ask leave to perform at the evening meal. The Lord granted it with a nod, and the hall relaxed, glad for the promise of song after such sober hours. When the last petitioner had gone, the Lord stood. The men-at-arms struck their halberds once upon the floor, a sharp echo that silenced the hall. The chaplain spoke a short prayer, commending the judgments given and asking for wisdom in their keeping. Then the Lord descended the dais and left through the side passage to his private chambers, the lady following with a glance backward at the assembled household. Slowly the tension drained from the room. The steward gathered his scrolls and keys, speaking quietly with the scribe. Men-at-arms returned to their posts on the walls. Courtiers clustered to discuss the morning's decisions. The great hall, so solemn moments before, shifted again toward ordinary life. Soon servants would bring trestle tables back for the noon meal. Soon the clang of dishes and chatter of pages would replace the hush of judgment. But for a time the air still held the weight of what had passed. Here in this hall, under banners faded by smoke and years, lives had been shaped, fields secured, taxes lifted, punishments given, oaths sworn. The Lord's power had shown itself not in sword alone, but in measured word, in justice seen and heard by all. The lady's quiet counsel and the chaplain's grave advice had tempered it, and the steward's records would make it lasting. Outside the great doors the petitioners dispersed, Some relieved, some muttering, some smiling through tears, they crossed the drawbridge into the cold, bright day, returning to farms and shops with news to share. Word of the court's rulings would spread by evening, carried in taverns and market stalls, shaping the life of the lands around the castle. Inside, the hall breathed again. Smoke curled from the hearth, mingling with the scents of rushes and tallow. A boy swept away footprints from the morning's crowd. A dog stretched and yawned in the warmth. Soon this place would echo with laughter and music, with the clatter of trenchers and the hum of feast. But just now it was still, and in that stillness the memory of justice lingered like the fading echo of a bell. Beyond the gatehouse and the busy outer yard lies the beating heart of any medieval castle or manor, the great hall. Step through its heavy doors and you enter a world at once practical and ceremonial, where the ordinary life of servants mingles with the glitter of feasts and the quiet gravity of justice. The building itself is impressive by design. Even a modest hall towers higher than the cottages outside the walls. Its roof beams, often oak darkened by smoke, rise like the ribs of an upturned ship. Walls are lime-washed or hung with woven tapestries to soften the chill. At one end, a vast hearth blazes beneath a hooded chimney, or in older places, an open central fire smolders with smoke venting through louvered roof. The floor may be packed earth in humble manners, but in great castles it is paved with stone or covered with strewn rushes scented with herbs. Morning begins quietly. Servants sweep yesterday's rushes and lay fresh, scattering lavender or mint to sweeten the air. Benches are scrubbed, tables set on trestles for whatever meal or meeting the day brings. Dogs doze by hearth while kitchen boys hurry past with trenchers and ale. Sunlight filters through narrow windows, catching dust motes and casting gold on worn banners. Soon the Lord's household stirs. Stewards enter first, checking tallies and planning work. Messengers deliver letters sealed with wax. Clerks unroll parchment to record rents or judgments. Minor nobles or visiting merchants wait along walls, hats in hand, hoping for audience. Guards warm themselves near fire, their mail softly clinking. The hall feels like crossroads where every strand of the estate's life passes. Meals punctuate the day. The main meal comes at mid-morning or noon. Long tables fill. Lord and lady at high table on a raised dais, beneath canopy or painted screen. Family and honored guests nearby, household knights, chaplains, clerks, and servants farther down. Trenchers of coarse bread hold meat or pottage. Ale and wine flow in shared cups. Spices show wealth if used. Minstrels may play softly. Hawks perch along wall, and dogs skitter under benches for scraps. Conversation hums. Business near dais. Gossip farther down. Seating shows rank. To sit near the high table is honor. To eat at its board is privilege. Even the order of serving matters. Dishes pass first to lord, then downward. Stewards and butlers orchestrate with quiet mastery, while kitchen staff scurry unseen. On feast days the scene swells with color. Tapestries fresh hung, candles blazing, musician loud, fools capering to laughter. Platters of roasted boar or peacock arrive, subtlety, sugar sculpture, might grace table if wealth allows. But the hall is it only for eating? It is courtroom and council chamber. After meal or on set days, the Lord sits in carved chair or beneath canopy to hear petitions. Villagers come to seek judgment in disputes over land or debt. Merchants request safe passage or license to sell. Minor crimes are tried, theft, trespass, poaching. Witnesses speak, clerks record. Sometimes punishments are mild fines, sometimes harsh. The Lord's word here carries weight of law. Ceremony thrives in this space. Oaths of fealty are sworn on gospel or sword. Marriages are celebrated before hearth, then feasted at same tables. Knights are dubbed with solemn taps on shoulder. Heralds proclaim news of war or peace. Messengers present gifts from distant courts. Even in peaceful times, such rituals remind all who holds power. Daily business can be surprisingly homely. In corners, scribes tally harvest or taxes. Bailiffs confer about sheep and timber. A falconer might report on birds' health. A huntsman discuss tomorrow's chase. Artisans bring work for approval, a new saddle, a repaired door. Children of lordly house sometimes play at far end under nurse's eye, while parents speak with retainers. Thus grandeur and domesticity mingle under same soaring beams. Season shapes the hall. In winter fires roar huge, and rushes are deep to warm cold stone. Guests huddle near hearth while snow drives outside. In spring, banners and garlands fresh as walls. Talk turns to planting and hunts. Summer brings open doors, cooling breezes, musicians and minstrels in brighter mood. Autumn fills tables with harvest plenty. Accounts of grain and wine dominate clerks' work. Lighting shifts with sun. By day, narrow windows spill pale glow. By night, candles and oil lamps shimmer across polished cups and weapons. Shadows leap on tapestries telling saints' tales or past battles. Firelight warms faces and makes jewels sparkle. It also hides cracks and humble rushes in forgiving dark. The hall listens to every voice. It hears prayers before meal, laughter of guests, the sharp cry of justice pronounced, the soft sob of widow petitioning mercy. It echoes with footsteps of countless servants and the clink of arms. In siege or crisis, it becomes command center, tables cleared for maps, captains leaning over plans while messengers run. Despite grandeur, it is lived in. Dogs sleep on rushes, smoke blackens roof beams, spilled ale soaks floor. Children chase each other when no ceremony holds sway. Servants gossip in corners. The hall breathes like a living creature, shifting from solemn court a noisy feast to quiet hearth in one day. At night it transforms again. Tables are cleared, benches stacked, fires banked to slow glow, guards pace at edges, travelers granted shelter, sleep along walls wrapped in cloaks. In humbler manners, even lord's household may bed down here when upper chambers are few. The smell is of smoke, wool, and warm stone, silence broken by snores, an occasional restless dog, the drip of wax. Feast nights linger late, lutes play, dancers whirl, wine flows till jokes grow bold. Torches flare high, shadows leap, and from dais the Lord may toast guests or listen to tales of heroism. When revel ends, echoes fade slowly. Only embers and a few drowsing servants remain. Dawn will come soon, and with it sweeping and fresh rushes for another day's round. To understand medieval power, one must know this room. The great hall isn't merely dining space, but stage of rule, justice, hospitality, and memory. Here alliances are forged, disputes ended, stories told that bind lord to people. It is public face of household and private heart at once. So when you picture a castle, see not only battlements, but this long, firelit chamber. Hear clatter of trenchers, rustle of silk beside homespun, whispered prayers, shouted commands. Smell roasting meat, beeswax, smoke. The great hall gathers a whole world under its beams, a place where power wears human face and night ends in warmth. High above the roar of the great hall and the clang of the yard lies a quieter, sunlit world, the solar. In many castles this was the private withdrawing room of the lady of the household, part chamber, part workshop, part seat of influence. Here the stone walls soften with tapestries, the air warms with fire, and voices hush to the pace of spinning wheels, reading, and counsel. It is a world apart, yet one that shapes life below. The solar is usually built on an upper floor, facing the rising sun. Thick arrow-slit windows have been widened into small glazed lights where the family can afford it. Shutters close tight against storm and winter. Walls hung with embroidered hangings to cut cold. Floor strewn with woven rugs or rushes scented with herbs. A carved chest holds linens and treasures. A great chair by hearth marks the lady's seat. Here she could look out across courtyard, gardens, or rolling fields, ruling quietly from warmth and light. Morning begins early. The lady rises from her chamber. Sometimes the solar doubles as sleeping room, sometimes separate, and comes to supervise daily work. Maids bring ewers of water, comb out hair, lace gowns. In this calm space she listens to reports, steward on household accounts, reeve on harvest, nurse on children's health. Though a man may hold nominal power, many castles run on her judgment, smoothing frictions, settling provisions, and deciding what feasts or fasts the household will keep. Isle craft fills the room. Embroidery frames stand ready, their silk and gold threads shining in morning light. Ladies and companions bend over intricate saints, beasts or floral borders destined for chapel or hall. Spinning wheels or drop spindles hum, baskets overflow with wool and flax. Some weave narrow tapestries, others sew garments. Work is both piety and prestige. Fine embroidery shows skill, wealth, and devotion. A half-finished altar cloth may rest beside a child's simple tunic. Reading is cherished here when books exist. Illuminated psalter or romance sits on lectern. If the lady cannot read Latin, a companion or chaplain reads aloud. Stories of saints, Arthurian knights, or courteous love mingle with scripture. Music too drifts through solar, lute or harp strummed by handmaid, soft songs to pass hours. These are not idle moments. They create culture and comfort that shape the household's soul. Children often play at her feet. Young heirs learn letters, younger daughters practice stitches. Nurse watches infants near hearth. Between lessons and games, the lady teaches manners, prayers, and family tales. In this way, the solar becomes first schoolroom, shaping next generation of lords and ladies. Visitors find here another court, smaller but powerful. Lesser knights' wives seek advice. Local nuns bring news or ask patronage. Merchants present fine cloth or jewelry. Quietly, dowries arranged, disputes soothed, marriages planned. The great hall may echo with men's oaths and feasts, but upstairs the solar weaves social fabric. Faith is gentle presence. Crucifix hangs above hearth, candles burn before virgin or patron saint. Here prayers are whispered for husband at war, son at school, or sick servant below. Sometimes chaplain visits to read from lives of saints. Sometimes ladies sing plain chants softly as they work. Seasons color life. Winter keeps household close. Solar blazes with fire, tapestries thick, work steady. Spring brings planning of gardens, clothing for new season, Easter gifts. Summer may draw lady to shaded window to oversee herb drying and stores. She might visit meadows or orchards. Autumn full with harvest, accounting, and feast preparation. While thought gentle, a lady's role is demanding. She manages supplies, medicines, and servants, defends castle if husband absent, arbitrates quarrels. Letters may be dictated here, sealed with that ring, finances for dowries and rents recorded. Her calm strength holds community through siege or famine. Clothing and beauty tended here too. Wardrobe chests full of gowns, veils, mantles. Maids heat irons for crimping, mix scented oils, polished jewelry. Special gowns prepared for feast or mass. Children's clothes mended. On quiet afternoon, laughter may bubble as new fabrics tried or songs shared while dressing dolls. Yet this is it cloistered luxury. Solar rings with spinning and stitching because garments must be made. Herbal remedies prepared because illness strikes without warning. Lady may soothe frightened servant, plan rations for winter, or pray for safety during siege. In her quiet upper room she bears weight equal to nights below. Evenings grow warm and golden, fire crackles low, women finish days sewing, children sleep on cushions. Perhaps husband climbs stairs to share wine and talk away from noise. Candles flicker, shadows dance on tapestries of saints and hunting scenes. Outside wind moans through arrow slits, but within is island of light and steadiness. So when you think of castle life, look beyond armory and hall. Picture that calm lady's solar hearth glowing, silk threads shimmering, books and music soft, children learning, servants coming for counsel. A quiet stronghold of culture and care that kept fortress human. Deep within the castle's thick walls, far from the laughter of the great hall and the warmth of the kitchens, lay the armory. Its door was of oak banded with iron, worn smooth where countless hands had pushed it open. Beyond, the air was cool and dry, heavy with the scent of oiled leather and steel. Light slipped in through narrow slit high in the wall, catching on metal and make the room glow with a quiet, silvery sheen. Here was stored the castle's strength. Racks of spears stood in orderly lines, ash shafts polished and points dark with oil. Shields leaned along the walls, their painted devices dulled from years of use, edges nicked and mended with rawhide. In the center, great tables held swords, some slender and long for riding, others heavy-bladed for the press of battle. Suits of mail hung from iron hooks, the links shimmering like rain when the light touched them. The master of the armory arrived first each morning. He was a broad man, his beard touched with gray, his hands scarred but deft. From a peg he took his leather apron and tied it on with practiced ease. He checked the great room with a soldier's eye, the dryness of the air, the neatness of the racks, the safety of each blade. Moisture was an enemy here, so was disorder. Then he stirred the small brazier in the corner and set a pot of oil to warm. Soon his apprentices came clattering down the stone stair, boys of 12 or so, eager and weary in equal measure. They swept the floor, wiped dust from hilts, and carried suits of mail to the racks. One boy began pumping the whetstone wheel, its low whir filling the quiet room. Another mixed beeswax with tallow for the leather belts and scabbards. The master gave them their orders in short, gruff words, but with a kindness that showed in the small nod he gave when a task was well done. This was not a place of idle display. Each item here had purpose, and each needed care. Swords were examined for rust, their edges touched to the wheel and then honed with a soft stone until keen. Spearheads were checked for cracks, shafts were sanded smooth and rubbed with oil, shields were repaired, bindings tightened, paint refreshed where the device had faded. Even the great crossbows, powerful and dangerous, were disassembled and cleaned, their strings waxed, their stocks polished. The master's own corner was a wonder of tools: awls, rivets, hammers, tongs, leather scraps for mending straps, buckles of brass and steel, bowls of dark oil that smelled faintly of pine. From here he could make or mend nearly anything the garrison might need. He kept careful record, too, which knight's harness was being repaired, which soldier's sword needed regrinding, which helmets must be fitted anew. His ledger, though plain, was as important as any blade. From time to time, men-at-arms came down the stair to fetch or return gear. A soldier might bring his mail for patching, showing where a link had broken in last week's drill. A page might arrive to collect a clean sword for his master, standing awkwardly under the armorer's quiet scrutiny. Each was served in turn, but none before the master had checked and approved the work. To him, a loose rivet or a dull edge was no small thing. It could mean life or death. As the morning passed, the room rang with soft music of craft, the rasp of files, the whisper of cloth on steel, the slow rhythmic thump of a hammer closing a rivet. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light. The apprentices sweated at the wheel, but smiled when the master passed, and ran a calloused thumb along their finished edges. He taught as he worked, explaining how to harden a blade, why to oil mail in winter, how to fit a helm so it would not twist in battle. Sometimes knights themselves came, bringing fine pieces for care. One arrived today, Sir Alaric, tall and broad-shouldered, his surcoat dusty from the road. He bore a sword with a deep notch near the guard. The master frowned, turning it in the light. They spoke softly, knight and craftsman, about the break of the edge, the grind it would take to make it true again. Sir Alaric watched with respect as the master set to work, sparks flaring at the wheel while the boy pumped steadily. At noon, the apprentices ate their bread and cheese in a corner, wiping hands clean of oil before touching food. The master took only a little, busy still with a helm that needed riveting. Outside the armory, the castle bustled, bells rang, hooves clattered. But here the world seemed slower, marked by patient craft and quiet diligence. This was the hidden forge of safety. If the Lord's men rode to war, it would be the master's care that kept them whole. By afternoon, the room grew warmer from the brazier and the work. The boys cleaned a suit of plate brought in by a knight's squire, breastplate, backplate, vambraces, greaves. Each piece was rubbed with vinegar and salt to lift spots of rust, then polished to a deep, cold shine. The master checked every strap, every buckle, testing with firm hands until satisfied. He showed the boys how to lace the pieces in proper order, teaching them the craft that kept warriors safe beneath their shining shells. A messenger arrived late in the day with a request from the steward. A patrol must ride tomorrow at dawn, and their gear must be ready. The master nodded and went to the racks. He chose spears of sound ash and straight grain, selected a bundle of stout crossbows, and oversaw the stringing himself. Arrows were counted, their heads checked for sharpness and secure binding. Helmets were pulled from shelves and lined up neatly, each with its strap strong and clean. As evening drew on, the day's repairs were done. Swords gleamed on their racks, shields were stacked with painted faces freshened, mail hung oiled and whole. The apprentices swept the floor, gathering fallen filings of steel and stray bits of leather. The master closed his ledger with a thump and wiped his hands on a rag black with years of work. He looked around the armory once more, eyes sharp, and nodded in quiet approval. Before the fires in the great hall blazed for supper, knights and men-at-arms came again to collect their gear. Some laughed and joked as they strapped on swords, others were quiet, testing an edge with thumb or the swing of a wrist. Each left with gear secure, owing silent thanks to the patient hands that had made it ready. The master watched them go, pride hidden but strong beneath his calm. When the last had departed and the room was still, the apprentices banked the brazier and hung up aprons. The light had turned soft and gold through the high slit. The master walked once around the room, touching a shield here, a helm there, as if to bless his charges. Then he shut the heavy door and turned the great iron key. Outside, the castle feasted and laughed. Inside, the armory lay quiet, its strength sleeping but ready for whatever the morrow might bring. At dawn, the castle's outer meadow lay silvered with dew, the grass bending under a thin veil of mist. All was quiet but for the clink of stakes and the low voices of men setting the day's stage. Soon this wide green would change from still pasture to roaring festival, tournament field where knights would prove their skill and courage before lord and lady, merchant and peasant alike. Carpenters came first, hauling long timbers to build the tillyard. They hammered railings into place to divide the lists, the long, narrow lane where knights would charge each other with lowered lances. Canvas pavilions rose beyond, bright with the colors of noble houses, crimson lions, black stags, silver stars. Pages ran to and fro, pounding stakes and tying ropes, their breath white in the cold. By the time the first sun struck the field, the skeleton of the day's spectacle stood ready. Vendors arrived next, pushing carts heavy with wares. Bakers stacked pies and crusty bread. Brewers rolled barrels of ale. Tinkers unpacked knives and trinkets for sale. The smell of roasting meat soon drifted across the damp grass as spits were set up near the edge of the meadow. Bright flags snapped in the rising breeze. A minstrel strummed a lute while waiting for the crowd that would soon arrive. From the castle gate came the heralds, proud in tabards bearing the Lord's arms. They inspected the lists, tested the ropes, and barked orders to clear the way. With them rode the master of the games, tall and solemn, carrying a staff tipped with silver. He examined the rails, checked the ground for holes that might trip a horse, and nodded his approval. Then he ordered the banners raised, one for each knight who would ride, their colors bright against the pale morning sky. By mid-morning the field was alive. Farmers streamed in from the surrounding countryside, children perched on shoulders or tugging at skirts. Merchants claimed good places to watch, spreading blankets and unpacking baskets of food. Ladies from nearby manors arrived in wagons, their servants bustling with stools and cushions. Trumpeters sounded testing calls, their notes bright and brassy across the open air. Then came the knights. One by one they rode down from the castle, splendid on their destriers. Mail gleamed where the sun struck. Surcoats of silk or wool showed each man colors. Pages trotted behind with spare lances and shields. Helmets hung from saddles or were carried high by squires. Some knights waved to the crowd to cheers and calls. Others rode silent, deep in thought. The smell of horse and leather mingled with the sharp tang of oiled steel. The lord and lady arrived last, seated on a raised wooden stand draped in cloth of gold. With them came courtiers, heralds, and a company of musicians. As the trumpets sounded, the crowd rose to cheer, hats waving, children shrieking with delight. The Lord stood and lifted a hand for silence. The herald stepped forward and called the opening of the games in a voice that carried across the whole field. The day began with the melee, a grand mock battle between teams of knights. Lances were set aside for this. Swords blunted but still heavy were drawn. At a horn's blast, the two sides thundered together in a whirl of horses and shouting. Dust rose, bright against the morning light. The crowd gasped and roared as men clashed and circled, their helms shining, their banners whipping in the wind. Though play, it was no gentle game. More than one man would carry bruises home. After the melee, pages helped their masters back to the pavilions. Armor was loosened, sweat-wet linen changed, and horses rubbed down with straw. Ale was brought, wounds were checked and bound if needed. The air smelled of trampled grass and hot iron, of horse and men and excitement. Meanwhile, jugglers and minstrels entertained the crowd, and vendors sold meat pies and cups of spiced wine. Children ran laughing among the tents, wooden swords clashing in imitation of the real knights. Then came the joust, the heart of the tournament. The rail between the lists was checked once more, its ropes taut, its shields freshly hung. Heralds rode out, calling the names of the first pair of challengers. The crowd hushed, then roared as the knights took their places at either end of the long lane. Lances gleamed, shields were set, and banners rippled behind them. The trumpet sounded, horses surged forward, pounding the ground with thunder. Dust flew as the two knights hurtled toward one another, lances level, eyes fixed through narrow visor slit. They struck with a crash like splitting oak. One lance shattered, Splinters flying, the crowd gasped and then cheered wildly as the riders wheeled and raised their weapons in salute. So it went, bout after bout, knights charging, lances breaking, skill and strength tested before all. Some were unhorsed to tumble in the dirt, helped up by laughing squires. Others held fast in their saddles and saluted with grace. Each pass was announced by the heralds, each victor awarded points by the judges. Between bouts, the field rang with music and laughter, children climbing the rail for a better look until a beetle shooed them back. At midday, the Lord's banner was raised for the pause of dinner. The knights dismounted and retired to their pavilions. The crowd feasted on bread, cheese, pies, and roast meats. Musicians played lively tunes while jugglers tossed bright balls high against the sky. Merchants called their wares ribbons in knightly colors, badges of each noble house, sweets and sugared almonds. The air was warm now. The morning mist burned away, leaving a clear sky and a scent of grass and horse. In the afternoon came the final tilts, the great challenges between the highest-ranked knights. The crowd grew hushed with excitement as each pair rode out. Horses shone with brushed coats, armor glittered where polished. Some knights prayed softly before mounting, touching charms or tokens from loved ones. The Lord and Lady watched closely, their faces intent, as champions thundered down the lists. One match drew breathless silence. Sir Alaric of the castle's own guard against a visiting lord famed for his strength. They lowered lances, their pages stepping back. Trumpets sounded once, twice, and they charged. The impact was fierce. Both swayed but held their seats. A second pass, another clash, splinters flying. On the third, Sir Alaric struck true. His opponent reeled and fell, thudding to the earth with a crash that silenced all. Then the crowd erupted, cheering and waving banners as Alaric circled, saluting both his foe and his lord. When the last bout was done, the heralds proclaimed the victors. Prizes were brought forth, a golden circlet, a fine falcon, a purse of silver. The Lord presented them with solemn words. The lady tied ribbons to their arms, tokens of honor. Cheers rolled across the field like thunder. Children waved pennants and clapped their wooden swords together in delight. As the sun lowered, the mood shifted toward feast and song. Knights retired to strip their heavy armor, rubbing weary shoulders and laughing over the day's hits and misses. The field emptied slowly as vendors packed their goods and peasants drifted back to their villages, chattering about the bouts they had seen. Pages loaded carts with broken lances and battered shields. Only the carpenters lingered to tend the lists, pulling ropes and gathering fallen timbers. By twilight, the meadow lay quiet again, though trampled and littered with splinters. A few banners still hung limp in the cooling breeze. The pavilions were coming down one by one. From the castle came music, drifting faintly across the evening air. The victor's feast had begun in the great hall, bright with laughter and song. The tournament field, for all its glory, was but a stage. Its true tale now continued in the warmth of the castle above. When darkness fell, the last of the watchmen crossed the empty ground, lantern swinging. He paused once to look back at the rails and the wide, quiet meadow, imagining the roar and thunder that had filled it only hours ago. Then he climbed the hill to the Gatehouse, and the tournament field slept under stars, ready to wake again some day to the clash of lances and the cheer of the crowd. At the far edge of the castle yard, beyond the stables and kennels, stood a quiet row of timbered sheds and fenced pens. This was the Falconer's Mews, a place of keen eyes and swift wings, where the art of hunting with hawks and falcons was tended with care. Though the castle bustled with soldiers and servants, here a calmer rhythm ruled, one of feeding, training, and trust between man and bird. The Mews woke early. Before dawn the falconer rose from his small loft above the sheds, pulling on a thick wool tunic and leather gloves. He moved with soft, deliberate steps, so as not to startle the birds still sleeping on their perches. Each was hooded, resting in darkness, feathers sleek and heads bowed. Only the faint creak of leather and the rustle of straw broke the stillness as he lit a single lantern. His first task was to greet each bird. Moving from perch to perch, he checked Jess's thin straps of leather fastened to each leg, testing their knots and condition. He touched each hood gently, murmuring a soft word to soothe the bird beneath. Here perched proud goshawks and slender peregrines, here stoic kestrels and a single rare gerfalcon, pale as winter cloud. Each had a name known only to the falconer and his young apprentice. Next came feeding. Small wooden boxes held yesterday's quarry, rabbits, pigeons, and morsels of fresh meat. The falconer weighed each portion with care. Too much would make a bird heavy and slow, too little would leave it weak. With gloved hand he offered the meal, watching each falcon tear and swallow with sharp, clean beak. The sound was soft but purposeful, the morning breaking with the rustle of feathers and the faint crunch of bone. The apprentice arrived then, rubbing sleep from his eyes but eager to learn. He swept the mews, changing soiled straw for clean, and scrubbed the shallow water troughs where the birds bathed. The falconer guided him with calm patience, how to carry a hawk without alarming it, how to keep the leather supple, how to read the faint shifting of feathers that meant contentment or unease. When the sun lifted above the walls, training began. The falconer chose one bird at a time, lifting it gently from the perch to his gloved fist. He carried each out to the practice green beyond the yard, where a low post stood with the lure feathers tied to a line to mimic prey. There, with slow care, he removed the hood. The bird blinked at the light, eyes sharp as polished jet. Then, with a flex of wings, it launched skyward. The falconer worked the lure in smooth circles, calling softly. The hawk soared, wheeled, and stooped in swift dives, striking the lure with a clatter of feathers. The apprentice gasped each time at the grace and speed. The falconer only smiled faintly, patient and precise. When the bird returned, landing steady on the glove, it was rewarded with a morsel of meat and a quiet stroke along its breast. Each bird had its own temperament. Some were fierce and quick, eager to strike, others calm and deliberate, watching long before moving. The falconer knew them all, which needed gentleness, which firmness, which would hunt hare, which would take birds on the wing. His work was part art, part science, and wholly trust. No knight could simply take a hawk and fly it well. Years of patience lived in each smooth motion of man and bird. Visitors sometimes came to the Mews, a lord wishing to see his prized peregrine, a lady hoping for a gentle kestrel to ride on her wrist, or children curious to watch the training. The falconer greeted them politely but sparingly. His world was quiet and required care. Still, he would sometimes let a child stroke the soft breast of a hooded bird, or show a noble guest how to tie a proper jess. Always the birds were treated with respect. They were hunters and companions, never pets. By midday the Mews hummed with small labors. The apprentice oiled leather hoods and jesses until they gleamed. Feathers shed in training were gathered to mend lures. Records were kept of each bird's weight and health, written in neat hand by the falconer himself. Outside, the castle might bustle with messengers and soldiers, but here was a calmer world of care and craft. In the afternoon, a hunt might be called. If the lord desired fresh sport, a page came running to the Mews with the order. Then the falconer and apprentice sprang into practiced action, selecting the right birds, weighing them one last time, fitting hoods and bells to their legs, and readying gloves and perches for travel. Soon the hunting party would ride out through the gate, hawks perched proudly on leathered fists, bells chiming softly as hooves clattered over the drawbridge. The falconer rode near the front, his trained eyes scanning sky and field. At his signal, a bird might be unhooded, its keen gaze locking on prey below. Then, with a sudden rush of wings, it would fly, swift, silent, deadly, stooping to strike a hare or flush a bird from cover. The falconer would ride hard to follow, the apprentice behind him, ready with lure and food to call the hawk back once the hunt was done. When the hunting party returned at dusk, the Mews grew lively. Birds were unhooded for cleaning, their feathers gently smoothed, their talons checked for breaks. Each was fed a measured meal and set again on its perch, where it would settle with a rustle and tuck its head under wing. The falconer moved from bird to bird with quiet murmurs, proud yet humble before their fierce grace. After the birds were tended, the Mews fell peaceful again. The apprentice swept the floor and hung the gloves to dry. The falconer checked each perch, tightened each knot, and banked the small brazier that kept the night chill at bay. Outside, the yard echoed with laughter and clatter from the great hall, but here only soft rustles and the occasional tinkling of bells broke the dark. Before sleep, the falconer took one last walk among his charges. He touched each hood lightly, feeling the steady stillness beneath. He listened to the slow shifting of feathers and the faint breathing of birds at rest. These were hunters, noble and wild, yet they had learned to trust him. It was a quiet bond, one that asked patience, respect, and deep understanding. At last he doused the lantern and climbed to his narrow loft. Through the tiny window he could see the night sky, vast and cold. Somewhere an owl called. Tomorrow would bring new hunts, new training, the same steady care. The Mews slept, filled with hidden power, swift wings, sharp talons, and the calm hands that guided them. Beneath the grand halls and lofty towers of a medieval castle, far from banners and tapestries, roars a world of fire and scent, the kitchens and bakehouse. Here, among huge hearths and echoing stone vaults, an army of cooks and helpers feed not only the lord and his household, but also guards, servants, guests, and sometimes half the countryside during feast days. It is hot, noisy, fragrant, and endlessly busy, the unseen heart that keeps a fortress alive. The kitchen is usually built in the castle's lower court or a separate stone range to guard against fire. Thick walls, high chimneys, and arched windows vent heat and smoke. Floors are flagged in stone, blackened by centuries of soot. Racks of spits, huge cauldrons, and iron hooks fill the space. Above, beams and pulley ropes dangle to lift heavy pots. The air smells of wood smoke, roasting meat, herbs, and baking bread. Before dawn, kitchen staff begin their day. Scullions and turnspits stoke fires from embers kept overnight, sweeping hearth and sharpening knives. Potboys haul water from well or cistern, shoulders straining under sloshing buckets. Gardeners and foragers bring baskets of herbs, onions, leeks. Dairymaids arrive with fresh milk and butter churned before sunup. Soon the head cook strides in, often a stern, clever man or woman with years of craft. First task, bread. The bakehouse, sometimes a separate chamber with great domed ovens, glows red before light. Bakers heat with bundles of faggots, then rake coals aside and sweep stone floors clean. Dough from previous night's kneading, wheat for lord's table, rye or maslin for servants, goes in on long wooden peels. The smell of baking fills every passage. Bread is life here. Trenchers for meat, loaves for guards, fine white manchet for nobility. Meanwhile, kitchen hearths come alive. Gigantic spit hold whole sides of beef, venison haunches or boars for feasts. Turnspit boys, sometimes chained dogs, run wheels in larger kitchens, keep meat slowly rotating. Cauldrons bubble with pottages, thick stews of grain, root, and bits of meat or fish. to feed workers. Skillets fry onions in dripping, kettles heat ale mulled with spice. Supplies arrive steadily through postern doors, fish from river, game from park, flour from mill, casks of ale and wine rolled from cool cellars. Pantry clerks tally each, cellarers unlock storerooms stacked with cheese, dried beans, salted pork, barrels of herring and fragrant spices, cinnamon, cloves, pepper for lord's dishes. These are wealth worth more than gold by weight. Hierarchy hums, head cook plans menu according to season and lord's wishes. Roast peacock with gilded feathers for feast, plain boiled beef for garrison. Undercooks chop and stir, pastry cooks craft pies both savory and sweet. Sauce makers grind herbs, nuts, and vinegar in mortars. Boys fetch and carry, learning slowly. Scullions scrub endless pots, each knows place. Kitchen runs like small army. On ordinary day, meals come twice. Hearty midday dinner and lighter supper at dusk. Guards and servants eat simple fare, coarse bread, pottage, cheese. Nobles dine on white bread, roasts, game birds, fish in sauce, custards, fruit tarts. Presentation matters, trenchers arranged with color, sauces poured bright green or golden. Some cooks carve coats of arms in pie crusts, or craft sugar subtleties shaped like castles or beasts. Feast day is storm of effort. Hunters bring deer, fishermen deliver fresh catch. Butchers in courtyard strip carcasses, meat salted or hung. Pastry cooks mold huge crust coffins to hold spiced fillings. Sauciers crush almonds for blancmange, boil sugar for sweets. Pages run messages, stewards oversee with sharp eye. Fires blaze hotter, air thick with spice and roast. Musicians may slip in to test hall's sound. All know Lord expects spectacle. Danger never far. Fire is greatest fear, spark on straw could destroy whole keep. Water kept nearby, stone vaulting and detached bakehouse help, but staff stay watchful. Burns and cuts common, turnspit boys' arms ache from hours at wheel. Smoke stings eyes, heat drains strength, yet pride carries them. To feed castle is honor. Season changes menu. Spring brings young lamb, herbs, fresh eggs. Summer fills larders with berries, river fish, early grains. Autumn is bounty slaughter of hogs, apples, nuts, mushrooms. Winter leans on salted meat, dried peas, stored roots, with spice to enliven. Cooks know how to stretch stores, yet surprise palate, skill prized by lord. Faith threads kitchen too. Meatless days keep fishmongers busy. Cooks create rich dishes without flesh. Eel pies, almond milk stews, feast of patron saint may see blessed bread. Lent transforms menu entirely. Prayers said for safety of hearth and plenty of larders. At night, after last platters cleared from great hall and leftovers sent to servants or poor at gate, Kitchen finally slows, fires banked but not out, bread ovens cooling. Staff eat plain supper, bits of roast, stew, bread dipped in dripping, laughing and recounting feast. Knives honed, pots scrubbed till shine, floors swept of bones and spilled flour. Head cook checks stores by lamplight, plans next day. The bakehouse too rests, ovens dark until midnight. Bakers return to knead dough for morning. Outside, guards patrol silent court. From windows wafts faint warm scent of cooling loaves. A fortress sleeps easier when its belly is full. To imagine castle life, do not picture only banners and knights. Picture this roaring, fragrant kitchen and bakehouse, where unknown hands fed armies and nobles, turned harvest into sustenance, and kept stone halls warm with life. Beneath the bright courtyards and guarded walls of a medieval castle lies another darker world, the dungeon. Here, stone passages descend into damp earth, air grows cold and still, torches gutter against wet walls. It is a place of fear and waiting, yet also of quiet endurance. For every glittering hall above, there is this shadowed undercroft below, where prisoners measure time by dripping water and the shuffle of the jailer's boots. Most castles did not build dungeons as torture chambers alone. They were secure storage rooms first. Deep cellars kept wine and grain safe, but when power needed a place to hold enemies, the lowest vaults served. Over time, some were purpose-built, barrel-vaulted stone rooms behind iron doors, or pits sunk deep where escape was nearly impossible. A heavy portcullis or oak door bound with iron bars sealed each entrance. Keys hung at the jailer's belt. To reach the dungeon, you pass twisting stair called a trap stair, narrow, uneven, meant to slow attackers. Air cools and smells of earth and old smoke. Sometimes a passage runs under moat or through bedrock, dripping with moisture. Lantern light glints on rusty shackles fixed into stone, on iron grills that close tiny ventilation shafts. Far above, a single slit of daylight or the echo of footsteps reminds you that life continues overhead. The jailer or gaoler lives half in shadow too, often a trusted servant of the Lord or constable. He keeps keys, feeds prisoners, maintains locks and chains. His work is quiet but vital. A lax jailer might lose a valuable captive, and with it ransom or leverage. Yet he is it always cruel. Some speak gently to inmates, bring extra bread if allowed, or act as messenger for desperate letters. Others are feared brutes. Prisoners vary widely. Some are captured knights, held for ransom, their stay to be surprisingly comfortable, with straw bedding, candles, and good food sent by family to encourage negotiation. Others are thieves or rebels awaiting judgment, their cells bare, diet of stale bread and water. Political enemies, hostage nobles, even unlucky debtors might share close quarters. Each carves marks into stone to count days. daily life is slow. Morning brings the jailer's shuffle and clank of keys. He slides food through hatch or enters with torch. Prisoners rise stiff from straw, drink water from bucket, speak in low voices if sharing space. Some pray, some curse, some simply endure. Light changes little, only faint glow through slit or lamp left to burn. Time blurs into drip, shuffle, sigh. Above, the castle lives on, feasts, hunts, councils. Faint echoes sometimes reach down, thrum of music, clang of arms. A prisoner hears life continuing, distant and unreachable, yet messages to travel. Coins slipped to jailer bring news of ransom talks, family letters, even small comforts like better blanket or candle. Not all dungeons are equal. Some are simple locked rooms, others are grim oubliettes, narrow shafts with no door on a grate above, prisoner lowered by rope or ladder, then left with little contact. Such pits are rare but feared. Darkness and damp break spirits quickly. Many castles, however, avoided such cruelty, preferring secure but livable cells, easier to keep ransoms healthy. Torture is more legend than daily fact here. While some lords use threat or pain to extract confessions, routine dungeon life was mostly confinement, not spectacle. Far more common were chains to limit movement, stocks or pillory in courtyard, or simple cold hunger. Still, tools existed. Rack, strappado, thumbscrews. Their shadow alone kept many compliant. Faith follows prisoners down, crosses scratched into walls, prayers whispered in dark. Chaplains or monks sometimes visit, bringing scripture, confession, or last rites. Condemned men carve names, saints, or pleas into stone, hoping some future soul will read. Candles blessed on holy days might flicker briefly in gloom. Season matters even here. Winter brings bitter cold and damp, breath misting in air, frost creeping across walls. Summer may stink of rot and sweat. Water seeps in after storms. Mice and rats are constant companions. Jailer battles mold and illness when he can, though prisoners often weaken from poor air and diet. Yet life persists. Captives trade stories, sing quietly to keep courage, scratch chessboards into floor, fashion dice from bread. Some befriend jailer or mice, some write letters if literate. Knights might practice sword drills with wooden staves if allowed. Small rituals keep sanity, washing face with cold water, stretching, murmuring prayers at dawn. Occasionally, freedom comes, a ransom paid, a truce signed, a pardon granted. Keys turn, door groans, prisoner steps blinking into light. Sometimes freedom means death, condemned led to scaffold or gallows. Both fates begin with that same clank of lock one morning. The dungeon is also part of castle strategy. Holding rival lord or enemy knight but win wealth and peace. Threat of sell keeps local peasants loyal. During siege, prisoners might be bargaining chips. Gowler thus keeps careful record of who sleeps where, who owes what, who might escape. Above all, the dungeon reminds that castles are not only homes, but instruments of power. Stone keeps secure food, arms, and people, friend or foe. To walk its depths is to feel that authority made real in chill air and iron bars. So when you imagine castle life, do not stop at banners and banquets. Picture also the dungeon, silent, cold, but alive with whispered hopes, steady duty of jailer, and slow passing of days. Here power waits and watches, patient as stone. The great hall of the castle lay quiet in the first pale hours of the day. Its stone walls held the coolness of the night, and the long flagged floor was damp with the hush of early mist. High above, blackened oak beams stretched into shadow, and from them hung banners faded by years of smoke from torches and hearth. A faint scent of ash and tallow drifted under the arched roof. At the far end the dais stood empty, the Lord's carved chair waiting in the dimness, flanked by a pair of tall iron candlesticks that still held the stubs of last night's feast. The hall was the heart of the castle, and though it slumbered now, it would soon stir to the pattern of the day. First came the servants, quiet-footed and sleepy-eyed, carrying brooms of birch and rags for polishing. They swept the rush-strewn floor, shaking out the old stalks that had caught scraps of food and ash. Mice scattered to corners as the work began. Buckets of clean herbs, mint, lavender, and dried sweet flag were scattered among the new rushes, filling the air with a cool, fresh scent. At the hearth, where a fire smoldered low, two boys coaxed the embers back to life. They fed them with dry kindling, and soon a curl of smoke lifted, followed by the first gentle crackle of flame. The hearth was vast enough to walk into, blackened stone rising like a cave. Here whole trees could be burned in winter. Iron pots hung ready, soot darkened but polished, where hands had grasped them for years. Above the lintel, carved into the stone, the family's crest stood watch, a lion rampant, worn smooth by smoke. As the fire strengthened, so too did the light in the hall. Sun found its way through the narrow windows set high in the wall, falling in thin beams that caught the floating dust. More servants arrived, carrying benches to be set along the trestle tables. These tables could be taken down when space was needed. This hall was both dining room and court, market and theatre. Today they were arranged for the morning meal, long planks laid across sturdy trestles, flanked by benches polished by generations of use. Soon the kitchen door opened with a bang, and warmth and smell rolled out. Bread just baked, porridge steaming, wheels of soft cheese cut for serving. Two women carried in baskets of trenchers flat rounds of coarse bread that would serve as both plate and food. Behind them came a boy balancing a tray of pottery mugs, the hall filled with the earthy scents of bread and smoke and the quiet murmur of preparation. When all was nearly ready, the first of the household began to drift in. Stable boys came first, their hair still damp from the trough where they had washed. A huntsman or two, lean and sun-browned, leaned their spears in the corner before taking seats near the hearth. They spoke in low voices, rubbing sleep from their eyes, boots dusty from the yard. Then maids came, laughing softly among themselves, and soon a murmur of life filled the great room. The steward entered at last, thin and brisk, a bundle of keys at his belt. He walked the hall with sharp gaze, inspecting tables, hearth, and banners. If a bench was crooked, he straightened it. If a candle guttered, he trimmed the wick with a small iron snuffer. Only when all was to his satisfaction did he give a short nod to the doorkeeper, who moved to stand by the great doors of oak bound with iron. With a groan and echo, the doors swung wide. The day had begun. Light and sound spilled in the ring of hammers from the smithy, a distant shout from the yard, the clatter of pails. Into this stride came the knights and men-at-arms, armor clinking softly as they crossed the hall. Some removed their helmets and set them on the benches. Others still smelled of the stables and horse sweat. Pages followed, small and serious, carrying cloaks and belts. Last came the Lord himself, tall beneath his fur-lined mantle, his sword at his hip. Behind him trailed his household chaplain, a grave man in dark robes, and the lady of the castle, calm and pale beneath her veil. At their entrance, the company rose and bowed. The Lord took his seat on the high dais. His lady sat beside him, and the chaplain stood ready with morning blessing. The hall grew still but for the crack of the fire. Grace was said, and the morning meal began. It was simple oat porridge sweetened with honey, bread still warm, cheese and apples from the storehouse, a little ale for the men, watered wine for the household. Pages hurried to and fro, filling mugs and fetching what was needed. Dogs slunk between the benches, hoping for scraps. A hawk perched silently on its master's wrist. Laughter and talk rose steadily, echoing against the stone vault. As the meal ended, servants swept away the trenchers and wiped the tables. Some would be fed to pigs, others were taken to the poor at the castle gate. The Lord remained seated, however, for the hall was now to be a place of justice. A small crowd of villagers and tenants had gathered at the far end, hats in hand, waiting to speak their petitions. The steward called them forward one by one. First came a miller complaining of broken rights to his stream, then a widow asking for relief from tax. The Lord listened gravely, his lady murmuring counsel at his side. Each case was considered. Sometimes the chaplain advised according to custom or scripture. The steward kept a careful tally on parchment, while a scribe scratched notes with squeaking quill. From time to time the heavy door creaked as new supplicants entered, or the dismissed left bowing low. Justice in the great hall was not swift, but it was public, and all listened. Sometimes the Lord spoke in clipped words, sometimes he questioned sharply, and sometimes, moved by pity, he leaned back and sighed before granting mercy. The lady would whisper and place a hand upon his arm. The steward would nod briskly and make a mark in the ledger. The hall grew warm with voices, the fire a steady backdrop to the theater of rule. When petitions ended, the mood changed again. Now came the herald with news from distant lands, carrying rolled parchments sealed in wax. Riders had brought word of a fair to held, of travelers to be granted passage, of unrest in a nearby town. Messengers knelt and spoke their tidings. Pages darted in with water and bread for them. The Lord leaned forward, questioning, while his knights murmured among themselves. By noon the hall was lively with planning. A hunting party would ride the next day. Repairs to the outer wall must be seen to. The armorer requested more iron for his forge. Orders were given and men dispatched. The air filled with purposeful clatter, swords belted on, boots ringing on stone, benches dragged aside to clear space. Soon the hall would be nearly empty again, its duties done until evening. As the sun slanted lower, servants returned to prepare the hall for supper. Fresh rushes were spread, the fire built high, and trestle tables set for a feast. For tonight a local lord would visit, bringing his retinue. The kitchen roared with activity, spits turning, pots bubbling, bread baking anew. The smell of roasting meat drifted through the doorways, rich and tempting. The musician arrived next, tuning lutes and fiddles, setting small stools near the dais. Torches were lit in their iron sconces, filling the hall with flickering warmth. Banners caught the firelight and seemed to sway gently in the rising heat. Children peeked in from the passageways, giggling at the busy scene before being shooed away. Dogs barked and leapt as platters were carried past. Then came the guests, knights in polished mail, ladies in velvet and pearls, merchants seeking favor. The Lord greeted them at the threshold, the lady offering soft words of welcome. Cloaks were hung, and men bowed before taking seats. Soon the tables groaned beneath their weight. Venison pies, roasted fowl, trenchers piled with stewed fruits, flagons of ale and wine. The feast began with prayer and the breaking of bread. Then talk rose loud and merry, music weaving through the noise of eating and laughter. The great hall, solemn this morning, now shone with life and power. The heart of the castle made warm and bright. Stories were told of hunts and battles, riddles and jests passed from mouth to mouth. Children were brought in to sing or recite, earning coins and smiles. Minstrels played until the candles dripped low and the torches burned short. Sometimes a knight would rise to dance with a lady, boots clattering on the flagstones, cloaks sweeping wide. Sometimes the Lord himself would laugh aloud, the weight of justice forgotten for the moment. Dogs gnawed bones beneath the benches. A falcon slept, hooded on its perch. As night deepened, the tables cleared again. Servants moved quietly to stack benches and sweep crumbs. The musicians packed their instruments. Guests retired to chambers in the castle or to lodgings beyond the gate. The lord and lady were led away by candle-bearing pages, their day of power and hospitality done. At last the fire burned low to glowing coals. The great hall stood empty save for a single guard by the door and the faint rustle of mice in the rushes. The banners hung still, catching the last breath of heat. Moonlight slipped through the high windows, silvering the long floor. And so the hall, which had woken to rule and to feast, returned to its quiet watch through the night. The day in the Abbey has been long but unhurried, filled with work and prayer, meals and small kindnesses. Now the sun is sinking beyond the fields, and a hush begins to gather like a slow tide. The bell in the tower tolls a single low note, rolling over the cloisters and gardens, calling the brothers to evening prayer. Lanterns flicker to life along the covered walks as sandals whisper toward the great church. In the nave, shadows stretch long across the worn flagstones. Candles glow in steady rows, their flames small but sure against the deepening dusk. The air smells of cool stone, beeswax, and the faint green breath of the garden carried in by evening breeze. One by one, monks enter and bow before taking their stalls in the choir. They come without haste, yet none linger. The rhythm of this hour is well known to all. Vespers begins with a single voice, low and resonant. Another joins, then another, until the whole choir breathes the psalms together. The sound is deep and warm, rising like incense toward the dark rafters above. No note is forced, no word hurried. It is music shaped by centuries, meant not to dazzle, but to soothe and lift hearts heavenward as night approaches. Outside the high windows, the last gold of sunset fades to violet. Birds settle in the eaves. The first bats flit against the glowing sky. Inside, the chant flows on, timeless and unbroken. The abbot leads the prayers with quiet strength, his voice neither louder nor softer than any other, yet steady as a bell. When the Magnificat is sung, the brothers stand, their habits swaying gently as they lift their hearts with merry song. When the final psalm ends, silence holds for a breath before the abbot gives the blessing. A deep Amen answers, and the service closes without applause or fanfare, only calm gratitude. The monks file out again, candles in hand to light the cloister's darkening paths. Outside, night has deepened. The first stars shimmer faintly above the abbey roof. The refectory glows with soft lantern light as the evening meal is shared. It is a simple supper, bread baked this morning, a thin broth fragrant with herbs from the garden, a few apples sliced and passed along the table. The reader's voice is absent tonight. Vespers has filled the need for words. The meal is eaten in silence, each monk savoring the quiet as much as the food. After supper, bowls and boards are cleaned with efficient care. Brothers move gently about their tasks, no sound louder than the clink of pottery or the faint rush of water from the kitchen cistern. Laughter is rare but not forbidden. Sometimes a small smile passes between friends, a wordless gladness for the day shared. When all is done, the abbey settles further. Some brothers return to the cloister walks, pacing slowly beneath the lanterns as they pray the rosary. Others visit the garden one last time to breathe the cool night air. The fountain trickles softly, and the scent of damp herbs mingles with distant wood smoke. The hives are silent now. Bees rest after their day's labor. The church doors remain open for a little while longer, inviting private prayer. A few monks slip inside to kneel alone before the altar. Candles burn steadily, their light gilding the stone and wood in gentle gold. Shadows sway on the walls as the flames tremble. These last moments before full night are cherished. Time to speak heart to God in solitude, to lay down worries before sleep. At last the bell tolls again, softer now a call to Compline, the final prayer. All gather once more in the church, but the mood is changed from Vespers. If Vespers is a warm sunset, Compline is a quiet lullaby. The chant is low, tender, and brief. Psalms of trust, prayers for safety in the dark hours ahead. Into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit, they sing, and the words seem to settle over every stone. When the last note fades, the abbot sprinkles holy water down the rows, blessing each brother. Heads bow, a faint sigh of peace ripples through the gathered men. Then the candles are carried out, and the church darkens behind them, left with only the steady glow of the sanctuary lamp. The cloisters now are quiet but alive with soft light. Lanterns sway gently in the night breeze. Their golden circles of illumination pool on the flagstones. Monks walk in twos or alone, heading back to the dormitory or lingering for one more silent prayer. No speech breaks the calm, only the sound of sandals and the whisper of robes. Stars wheel above the abbey roof, brilliant now in the deep night. The air is cool and smells of damp earth and herbs. Somewhere an owl calls softly from the orchard. Somewhere else a door closes with a muffled thud. The porter makes his final round, checking gates and locks, moving with the ease of long habit. When he is satisfied, he bows briefly toward the church and retires. Inside the dormitory, beds await in quiet rows. Brothers undress in silence, fold habits neatly, and slip beneath simple woolen blankets. A few read by candle for a short while, small prayer books held close, then snuff the flame and settle. Others kneel briefly at their beds before lying down. One by one the room fills with the soft sound of breathing. The abbey itself seems to sleep now. The scriptorium lies dark, its quills cleaned and laid aside. The garden rests under silver moonlight. The refectory is empty, but still smells faintly of bread and herbs. Only the sanctuary lamp burns on, a small flame keeping watch through the hours until dawn. Beyond the walls, the fields grow pale with starlight. A stream glimmers faintly as it winds past orchard and meadow. Villagers nearby have long gone to their beds, comforted by the sight of the abbey's steady tower against the sky. Its bell is silent for now, but its presence alone is enough to promise safety and prayer. Deep night holds the abbey gently. Its silence is it empty but full of faith, of work well done, of lives given to prayer and service. The stars wheel on, the lamp burns quietly, and within the brothers rest in the great stillness they have sought all day. The peace here feels older than stone, older even than song, a quiet that carries through centuries and cradles all who surrender to it. When the first faint light touches the horizon, the bell will wake and call again. But for now night reigns, soft, safe, and filled with a listening silence. It is a silence that comforts, a silence that blesses, a silence that whispers of rest deeper than sleep.